Hello and welcome to the Ministry Shift. My name is Simon Foster. I'm a member of Lichfield Diocese Mission Team. This week on the Ministry Shift, we're looking at the place of the deanery in the mission of God and of the Church. And I'm delighted to be joined by 3 of the diocese's 28 rural deans. So please would you tell us each who you are and just a little bit about the deanery that you represent. I'll come to you first, Debbie.
Hi, I'm Debbie Loughran. I'm Vicar of Rockwood Wood, Oakengates and Priorsley in the Deanery of Telford. So we're an urban deanery with 6 parishes, several benefices, and we're a real mixed bag, which is fantastic and a joy to work with.
Thank you, Debbie. Just down the road is Phil.
Thanks, Simon. Phil Cansdale is my name. I'm Vicar of Meal Brace, otherwise known as Trinity Churches often, and Area Dean of Shrewsbury or Shrewsbury, depending on what day of the week it is. And we're a similar mixture, really, of 12, 13 parishes, including the town centre and suburban parishes, but alongside that, some more rural settings. So a lovely mixture and a diversity in the local area.
Thank you, Phil. And also just down the road is Matthew Lefroy.
Hello, yes, I'm Vicar of Muxton and Lilleshall, 2 parishes on the northeastern side of Telford, 1 rural and 1 suburban. The deanery that I'm rural dean of is Edgemond and Shifnal, which is 2 historic deaneries pushed together. And so we've got a great mixture. We've got many rural parishes, we've got market towns, and we've got suburban parishes in all of that. And again, a really diverse mixture.
Thank you. So we do have 3 Shropshire deaneries, but very different deaneries, and a great team to work with today. This year, every deanery in the diocese has been asked to join in a programme called Shaping for Mission. And that scopes out a role it's largely a new role for deaneries, which have most often been places of mutual support, especially for clergy, and also a way of organising the governance of the deanery. Asking deaneries to think about mission is largely a new challenge, and of course that means a new challenge for rural deans too in coordinating their deanery around mission. So I'm going to begin with pitching at you quite a difficult question, I think, but it is one that has been asked in the Shaping for Mission process already a couple of times. And that is, how do diverse deaneries work towards a shared mission? Deaneries kind of contain such a wealth of traditions, of contexts, and of course of ministers as well. So what are some of the kind of hazards and hopes in that? And I'm going to pitch that question, Matthew, to you first, I think.
Oh, thanks for choosing me first. The short answer to that is, at the moment, I don't know. It's a really good question. And the reason is because our deanery is so diverse. I'm still, as rural dean, getting to grips. I've only been in the job just under a year, getting to grips with the whole diversity business in the deanery. So at the moment, we are concentrating on the relationships between the church leaders. I think it makes a huge difference if church leaders are cooperating and communicating and share a vision. And so our first step is really looking at the relationships in the deanery chapter and working on those, and then seeing what springs from those. Obviously, we have got differences in churchmanship, but also we've got similarities in our heart for our communities and the area. And we're discovering those and working really hard to explore those. So I think that's a good starting point.
Thank you. Debbie, do you think you'll kind of go in with the same approach? Do you think it's relationships between ministers and especially clergy that matters here?
I think it has to be, doesn't it? I think to start with, we've got to start with those relationships and building those relationships and cementing those relationships. because we are all different, as Matt said. We all have different theologies, we all have different churchmanships, but that's what makes us so diverse. That's what makes the gospel so alive in this place. We can't be, I don't think, truly inclusive unless we have diversity, because what I think of as inclusive is different to what another person would think of as inclusive. And so to have that diversity and that inclusivity, we need each other. So I think, yeah, I think we're starting with relationships in chapter as well. We're starting with bringing Deanery Synod together more so that the congregations are mixing more as well and getting to know one another. Because I think that we really need to know each other before we can start to see how we can work well together.
Phil, what are you doing to kind of start the process of building those relationships in a new way? I mean, they're relationships that are not new particularly. It's just that a new task is there.
And I think for us here, the chapter relationships have really deepened over COVID, and that's been really important to see, and us meeting fortnightly and our prayer life and our kind of honesty life really deepening. I'd want to say that I think probably even more important than that is to see people in our churches get to know each other, and just to discover that people in neighbouring parishes may not have two heads after all. And so the importance of telling stories together, I would never want to underestimate that. We've had a couple of synods recently, well, before the world ended back in March at least, where just telling stories around tables, and it doesn't take rocket science, but serve coffee, eat biscuits, tell stories. And just to find what God's doing, yes, in their Sunday life as churches, but in their Monday to Saturday life as well. And I think we begin to discover that, of course, there are differences, but rather than falling out over those, to find the common language of what God's doing has been a really good step for us here.
Thank you. Matthew, I mean, you kind of very honest in your opening response about the just kind of arriving at this afresh and building up that. Have you thought beyond the question of the clergy chapter and with Shaping for Mission? Any thoughts about how that might reach out into the congregations and indeed the other platforms for mission, chaplaincies and schools?
Yeah, I mean, one of the big things that I've been contemplating is that the Church of England has been set up with the unit of mission being the parish. So everything, the PCC, the incumbent, the way the Church of England works in parishes. And over the years recently, obviously, we've got multi-parish benefices, and we've had clergy in charge of several different benefices as well. But actually, there hasn't been any sense up till now that we need to change the unit of mission, which has been the parish. And to me, what this diocese is doing, and it's been done in other dioceses, is saying that the unit of mission now needs to change to be the deanery. And that asks all sorts of difficult questions about structure and organisation, and understanding from those who may not even come into our churches, but they see our church buildings as important. And for me, that's the question that I've kind of want to be answered first, is how much can we do as a deanery without actually looking at the fundamental structure of the Church of England?
That seems like a big question. That might be too big even for the ministry chair. But Debbie, what about you? What are the kind of mission-shaped issues that are coming up, like the one that Matthew's described there for your deanery?
I think it's a really valid point what Matt said, because traditionally we've looked after the parish and the parish has looked after the church, if you want to look at it in that way. And all the payments through to the diocese are parish share based, which are, whether we like it or not, based on the numbers of people we actually get through our doors, bums on seats, if you like, and occasional offices come in our direction. If we start to do funerals across deaneries, if we start to do mission across deaneries, if we start to have events across deaneries, then actually, yes, I agree with Matt that even just down to the base level of parish share needs to be potentially looked at to see how that's going to work. If we use the bigger churches for the bigger events of mission, and the income goes into them, are they going to get a bigger share? How does it work for the smaller churches that aren't quite so equipped in those ways? And I think in Telford, it's great because we've got the new Minster, and to see how they're working with the churches and working across the town and giving their time freely across the whole area. It's being able to show us that it can be done, which has been a real blessing for us in Telford, really. So I guess it's seeing how we can be generous but maintain what we're expected to maintain from a parish level as well.
So that sounds like there's almost a diversity in mission capacity or missional energy that needs to be balanced out in this process as well. Is that something that anybody wants to kind of recognize, build on?
I'd love to do that. I think for me, ultimately, mission is a team sport rather than a solo activity. So I think that's true within the life of a parish, but I think that's even truer in the life of a deanery. And actually, our mission will always be richer when we travel together. But I think that does ask some really hard questions. I think we may need to let go of some of our parish defensiveness, where we get over-occupied by which side of the road people live on and start drawing parish boundaries too strictly. And actually, we live in a network society increasingly, and particularly in the sort of towns where we are and all over the diocese, when there's new housing going up, where people are living much more mobile lives. And we've got to be thinking in terms of area and not just the very, very static kind of 17th century dividing lines of parishes. So I find that really exciting. And I think, you know, our mission, seeing new places, new people, has got to be on our hearts if we're going to see this happen.
So a challenge for parishes, a challenge for deaneries, of course, a challenge for the diocese and for the Church of England as a whole, and of course for us as ministers. Debbie, Phil, Matthew, thanks so much for being part of the ministry shift today. Next week, we turn our minds to Christmas again and ask the question, how do we preach for Christmas in 2020? Don't forget the Ministry Shift Awards. We're looking for the people, the ministers who have made a shift while you've been watching them in 2020, a shift that you'd like to celebrate. That could be a practical shift in ministry, a kind of spiritual journey that they've been on. Nominate anybody who you think deserves to be recognized by the Ministry Shift by emailing their name and just a few short lines of what you've seen them do this year to comms@lichfield.anglican.org. That's comms@lichfield.anglican.org. If you found anything about this week's show helpful, interesting, or useful, please do share that with friends. And don't forget to like and comment and spread the word. That's all for this week. Goodbye.